Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. This is Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and for the next hour, consider me your navigator on your journey to success in business, especially the trucking business. We can talk about anything here tonight, from getting started as a driver, signing on as a driver to a first company, leasing a truck, buying a truck, leasing to a carrier, changing to another carrier, going out and getting your own authority, dealing with the FMCSA, working with freight brokers, understanding the insurance requirements, the record-keeping requirements, you name it. We can talk about it here on this show tonight. If you're watching the live stream while you're driving, please turn your phone off, turn your phone on, turn the video off, dial the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. It's a much safer way to listen to the show. You can listen and participate at 917-889-9924. Once you're on the line, press number 1. This is a call-in talk show. We have several callers already on the line. If you're on the line now, go ahead and press number 1 on your keypad, and we will get you on the air if you have any questions or comments. It is an amazing time to be in the freight industry, and watching the market change and the reactions from everyone out there has been entertaining, to say the least. I think there's a lot of panic. I titled this show The Great Freight Fright of 2018 because I think that's what we have right now. We are in the third week of July, wrapping up the midsummer slump. I believe there's a lot of panic in the market right now for carriers. It's kind of an interesting situation that we have. And I think there are a lot of people that are getting their first little bit of a wake-up call, which is a good thing. I've been saying it for a while. If you go out and buy a truck and you're planning on building your business model for survival around the current rates, this might be a little bit of a slap in the face to you, because these rates are record highs. We will not keep setting records forever. At some point, we are going to level out and plateau. Now, that being said, what we're seeing and what we're experiencing right now is perfectly normal. It's exactly what I expected. I didn't do a show last week, but a couple of weeks ago, before we started to see this slump, I predicted this is exactly what would happen. And, the market is doing just like the market does every single year at this time of year. It might be a little bit exaggerated because we were seeing record rates. We were seeing rates that we had never seen before. Definition of a record, right? So when you have record highs, you have a lot further to fall. But what we're seeing is completely normal. So I want everybody to understand that. I've been seeing some of my own drivers are experiencing it as well. Some of the owner-operators leased to us at Patriot Star. One of them today told Elizabeth that he hasn't had to work this hard and sit this long with this much downtime in over 2 years. And that might be the case, but I don't believe that the market has everything to do with that. It's actually kind of interesting to see it. If you look at the graph year over year, we're actually still much higher in the rate category than we were a year ago, and the graph looks almost the same. It's just making that dip down, and we will see it start to return. Now, what is driving these rates? Let's take a look at the DAT trend lines. This is something I refer to all the time. Free information for those of you that are leased to some of the mega carriers, or if you're trying to learn about rates and lanes and about the information, check out DAT trend lines. Just Google that. It's completely free. We post links to it and screenshots of it in the various Facebook groups all the time. I'm getting a lot of information, a lot of feedback from the Trucking Rates and Lanes group. And we're over 20,000 members in that group now, which is awesome. We're getting a lot of good feedback. It's not a lot of, chest beating. Of course, there are people that you can't stop everybody from bragging about how great their rates are and everything else. But, we are seeing some interesting observations and the way the brokers are acting and some of the tips and tricks and techniques and different things that we're seeing out here, we're starting to get a lot of discussion on that in that group. I've actually kind of stayed hands off a little bit. I'm just letting that group go. I'm letting the discussions go. I'm letting everybody else, and I'm chiming in a lot more often. I do chime in from time to time over there about different rates and lanes, and I try to make positive negotiation concepts available over there. But I try not to, I don't censor anybody in that group. That was when I created that group, I think 2014, that would try to make it clear to everybody else. We don't kick anybody out for just a difference of opinion, as long as you're respectful and keep it PG-13 at least rated. So what that has done, though, is give a lot of different perspectives that have come into the group. We have new people, new brokers, we have new drivers, to seasoned veterans, and there's a big mix, and people that are fairly new to the industry are starting to see different trends than what people that have been in it for decades. And to see the interaction there is really interesting. And then a lot of people right now are they're in panic. Like I said, the great freight of 2018, people are afraid of what's going on. And if it's funny, because just 1 year ago, it was the exact same thing. And how people have short memories. So let's look at the trend lines right now. We'll just look at the national averages for vans. Now here's what's interesting. This is why I think this is kind of cool to watch. The last week of June. Now in June, we were talking about how great rates were. We were killing it, right? June was a fantastic month. Everything was awesome in June. So 1 month ago, and those are currently, we can see that trend just 1 month ago, 4 weeks ago, average van rates ending the week June 30th, 2018. We ended the week for vans at $2.32 per mile, and we were thrilled. I remember doing that show that week, and we were just ecstatic. Those were record rates, killing it in the market. Loved it. And I remember saying that, get ready for a roller coaster, because always the first week of July, and it was a little different because July 4th landed on a Wednesday, if you remember, midweek, kind of throws things off. If it's a long weekend, sometimes you've got, companies might take that Monday and throw in that Friday and make it a 4-day weekend, or maybe they take part of the early part of the week off, and so forth. But with Wednesday, we had the weekends, we had a midweek holiday. It really kind of threw that first week off. So it was interesting to see what happened. The first week of July, ending July 7th, spiked to $2.45 per mile on average nationwide, which is really, really good for a van. Now, it's a holiday week, so you should expect a spike in rates. The following week, second week of July, ending July 14th, ended the week, dropped a little bit to $2.38 a mile, which is exactly what we would have expected, because during a holiday, everybody runs for a premium. If you're out there running freight, if you're not taking the week off to go barbecue and drink beers with your buddies at the lake, and take the family out on the boat, go water skiing and on the, floating on the pontoon boat, what have you, if that's not what you're doing on the 4th of July, if you decided to be out there running freight, I know that you were all thinking about being at the lake on the boat. I know that that was in the back of your mind. So in order to convince you not to go to the lake, they had to pay well, had to pay handsomely. So brought the rates way, way up. So $2.45 a mile during that week. Exactly what we would expect. The following week, tapered back off about halfway to where we were before, $2.38, which is exactly what we would expect. Exactly. So here we were last week, and we started to slow down a little bit again. $2.33 a mile on average for vans, which is exactly 1 penny more than we were the last week of June. And in June, we were celebrating. We thought June was fantastic. It was the greatest month we'd ever seen. Set records. We still ended on a higher note than we did in June, and everybody's in a panic because rates are coming down. What we're seeing is a very typical trend for mid to end of July. It's going to continue through August, typically level out mid-August and plateau there the last couple weeks of August. And in September, we're going to start seeing, maybe the last week of August, start seeing rates coming back up. And as we go through the third and fourth quarter of the year. As we reach the end of the third quarter and definitely into the fourth quarter, we're going to see the spikes, and I expect it to be record-setting again. I just think it's really, really interesting to see the panic from people that how slow freight is. It's so slow. And everybody's panicking on these Facebook groups. Oh, it's tanking, and what are we going to do? Running for the hills. But we're still higher now than we were a month ago on average. And granted, we're probably tapering off. That rate was from ending on the week ending Saturday, and here we are on Tuesday. But we're exactly where we should be. There's nothing unusual about this trend right now. So it's very, very interesting. Flatbeds have been very, very stable. We're still seeing the midsummer slump a little there. 282 a month ago, last week of June, 282. We didn't see a big spike for the holiday, which when you, at some point, 282 is probably nearing the ceiling for what flatbed on average can sustain. 280 the third week of July, and the second week of July, and this third week of July, 3 cents over the past month, which is, for the midsummer, and it is a bit of a July slump. Now, flatbeds do tend to be stronger through the summer. That's when a lot of the construction is going on. You still have the landscaping supplies and building materials, and there's a lot going on with flatbed. It slows down more in the wintertime. So we kind of see inverse trends between the van and the flatbed segment. And in between there is the reefer segment. Let's talk about them for just a minute. Last week of June was $2.69 per mile. Now, remember, in the reefer segment, we're hauling produce, we're hauling food just the week before a major holiday, the biggest summer holiday of the year. So you expect reefer rates to be fairly high, $2.69 the last week of June. Going into the first week of July with the July 4th holiday, spiked at $2.77. Remember, watermelons are moving. You've got corn on the cob. You've got all your summer produce. You've got your, picnic supplies, right? So reefer always tends to spike right before any holiday. We see that. So rates were definitely higher the last week of June rather than on the van side. We didn't see quite a last week spike there. But reefer rates were really high last week of June, spiked during the holiday week, which is exactly what we would expect, dropped down to 270 the week after the holiday, and now down to 265. So we're slightly below where we were at the end of June, which is exactly what we expect from reefers. Exactly how reefers tend to work every single year, because after the holiday, the food stuff tends to slow down just a little bit. We're also kind of in a bit of a mid-season harvest season right now. So watermelons they're still moving, but they're slower. No big rush for the holidays and so forth. So reefer tends to slow down right now. Again, same thing's going to happen throughout August. We're probably going to see it taper off maybe a little more. I'm actually surprised, going back to vans a little bit, we're at 233. It would not surprise me if we get down to around, honestly, $2 a mile. If we bump back down to $2 a mile before this slump is over, it would not surprise me. But I'm surprised we're still holding strong at 233. We'll probably drop down in the mid 220 per mile, 225 or so, maybe 220 mid-August. And I would have said 210 a mile or $2 a mile, but I'm thinking 210 might be the absolute floor right now, maybe 215. So rates will be dropping. One of the comments that I saw was, that they could not survive if rates were ever below $2 a mile. And the way it was phrased is, obviously, rates could never possibly be below $2 per mile. That was kind of the attitude that they had in this comment. If you look back exactly 1 year ago to June, July last year, we were at $1.70, $1.80 a mile in the van segment a year ago. And we loved it. Those were good rates. $2 a mile was a dream. I remember when we crested that $2 a mile limit again, and I hadn't seen that since 2014. 2014 was the last time we saw a record-setting year like this. Nothing to compare to what we have right now. 2014, though, we had much higher fuel costs, so a lot of that was the fuel surcharge built into the rate. So once we crossed that $2 a mile mark, it was really a benchmark. It's possible that we go back down below that. It's imperative that you understand your cost. Know what your cost per mile is. Know what your cost per day is. Absolutely a lot of people right now are struggling, looking for that load, waiting for that rate. There's a big, I encourage the 3 o'clock hustle. Wait till the end of the day, the afternoon, when the brokers have to push it off to full to understand what profitability would be on that lane. So you may not get the record-setting rates that you got a week ago. We are on a downward trend. So it was 238, and I'm looking at the van segment because that's just kind of the most common of all 3 segments there. But 238 a week ago, dropped down 5 cents. This week will probably drop down 3 to 5 cents again this following week. So we're on a downward trend. So when you're looking at the $2.33, understand that you're probably not quite going to get there. You might be a little less. It's great if you can get there or better. Remember, an average. All of these numbers are averages. That means some will be higher, but certainly some will be lower. You have to look, and these are national. So some lanes pay more than others. Some areas pay more than others. Understand the lanes that you're going into. Pay real close attention to the inbound and outbound ratios, the load to truck ratios, and dispatch yourself accordingly. Try to stay, the advice isn't really to stay in the best areas. I mean, obviously that's the easy thing to do. Stay in the good areas. If you just stay in an area where it's always 10-to-1 freight and you go from a 10-to-1 area to another 10-to-1 area, that's great, easy. But here's the thing. Going from a 10-to-1 area to another 10-to-1 area where it's 10 loads to 1 truck, that is, go to 10-to-1, 10-to-1, it's a lateral move and you're not going to see skyrocketing rates. You're really just, it wouldn't honestly be a whole lot different than going from an area where it's 5-to-1 trucks to loads, rather, where there's more trucks than loads, such as maybe South Florida. You go from South Florida to an area like Denver, Colorado, where it's another bad market. If you go from a bad market to a bad market, you can typically get just as good a rates if you go from a good market to another good market. Where you're going to see your phenomenal rates, your record-setting rates that are knocking it out of the park, which are keeping these averages up, is when you go from that really, really good area to the bad area. So you go from a spot that's got 100 loads posted, but there's only 1 truck in the area, so you know you're in a good market. Then the load that you pick is going to an area where it's an inverse situation and there are more trucks than loads. You have to make your money going in. So much like going in, I always use Florida as an example. If you go into Florida 9 months out of the year, there is a period during produce season and harvest season when there's a period where the Florida rates come up, but most of the time there are more trucks in Florida because it's a consumer state. They bring stuff in and there's usually not a lot going back out other than produce, which is in that short period of time. If you're coming in, you have to make sure that you get enough of a rate to get a load back out. You might get $1 a mile out, the cheap freight. You might get that cheap freight out. Make sure you get enough in that even if you had to deadhead out or you take that cheap load, that you can still make your numbers and be profitable. But in order to do that, you have to know what your numbers are. Now, I hear a lot of people say, I just avoid Florida. I would never go to Florida. You can't make any money in Florida. And I absolutely disagree with that. You can make a lot of money going into Florida as long as you make your money going in. Plan on either taking something cheap, your cheap load out, or plan on deadheading out. Get your money going in. I used to say, take your back haul with you. You can make the money. You can keep your overall revenue in that average by getting more in and planning on deadhead or a lesser amount coming back out of those areas. That's where you're going to make the most money, actually, is moving from a good area to a bad area. If you can work it right and make sure you're in the best areas on the best days of the week. So worst thing you could do is find yourself in but you're talking about a whole day's drive, and now it's Saturday. Now you're stuck for the whole weekend. So you really have to be careful when you're dispatching to put yourself in the right markets at the right time. Make your money going from the good areas to the bad areas, but plan on working that market in your favor to get back to a good area and keep your averages up. So you can keep your average, if everybody just ran at the averages at 233 a mile and you went from a good area to a good area, you'll probably get your 233 a mile. At the same time, if you go from a bad area to another bad area, also probably get your 233 a mile. If you go from a good area to a bad area, you're probably going to do significantly better. So let's say you might get $3 a mile going into a bad area, but you might only get $1.70, $1.80 coming back, and the average ends up being around $2.33 a mile. You're always going to keep around that average. That's really the key to understanding your numbers and knowing the markets and playing the averages to your favor and understanding how that will work. The DAT trend lines is great. It will show you the national averages. It'll also break down the highest paying regional averages if you click into that. You can also look a little further if you have any of the DAT load board products. I know Truck Stop has similar stuff, but you can see the inbound outbound ratios, the load to truck ratios. Truck Stop uses an inbound outbound formula. So basically all the loads that are posted going into an area versus all the loads posted going out of that area, which is a good indicator of if you know you're going to a market, how many loads are delivering there, which means how many trucks will be there tomorrow, right? So if there's 100 loads going to an area, but only one load posted going back out, you know there's 100 trucks that will be there tomorrow, but there's only one load posted coming back out. You know it'll be a bad area. And it's not necessarily how many trucks are posted, but it's just based on the loads. Now, DAT does it the other way around, where they take how many loads are posted out of an area versus how many trucks are posted in that same region. So it's also a good indicator. Now, it's just an indicator. It's just a tool. So the actual supply and demand is what matters. It's another thing you got to wrap your mind around. The actual supply and demand is the only thing that drives market prices. It doesn't matter what the gas gauge says. If you run out of fuel, right? If you run out of diesel fuel, you're running out. It doesn't matter if your gauge is broken and it says you're full. Okay? Same thing with this product. I see people say, well, we should post rates that are higher, or, you know, brokers post more loads than are actually there to skew the market. Well, it doesn't skew the market. It just changes the gauge. And typically it's a pretty standardized thing. So it doesn't matter if it's on Monday, they're going to post, 2 or 3 loads, and on Tuesday, they're going to post the same 2 or 3 loads. So it's still, it equals out. So the gauge is usually fairly consistent. What you have to understand is it's just a gauge. It doesn't matter if the gauge says that there's 100 loads and only one truck posted, but you get there and there's actually 100 trucks sitting there and only one load. The gauge is just a gauge. Again, the actual market conditions are what change prices. The other thing that is a very big misnomer, I mean, people don't understand what's happening, is when brokers quote a price. And the thought process is brokers intentionally try to drive rates down. They can't. The market doesn't work that way. Brokers can try to move stuff cheap all day long. The trucks have to accept that rate. Now, if there are not enough trucks to go around, and granted, some drivers will do that. Some dispatchers will do that. Some carriers will do that. They'll accept a load. A broker offers $1.50 a mile, and that's all they hear for the first, they're on the phone for an hour, and all they hear is $1.50 a mile type rates, and they'll accept $1.50 a mile. But that might be an initial offer from what the broker says, or even if you're dealing with a direct shipper. But if there are actually more loads than trucks, it will eventually get to the point where when the broker calls, there is no truck available. The only way that they're going to be able to convince a truck to take anything is to come up on the rate. That's how supply and demand works. It doesn't matter if the broker tries to keep the rates down, and they might all try, and they might all, even if they all got together and, decided in a big group, a big broker union, and they said, we're not going to move anything for more than $1 a mile because we're big bad brokers, and that's how it doesn't work that way. Because if there are not enough trucks, actual trucks, not how many trucks are posted on a load board, not how many loads are posted, but when there are actually physical trucks in that area, that actual supply and demand is what drives rates. Not what the gauge says, not what the tools say. The tools are literally just that. They are just an indicator so that you can relatively understand what the market looks like. And again, there's different ways. 2 different load boards use 2 different methods to come up with that indicator, that gauge, but they're just gauging what the market looks like. It's not actual market data. It's just a gauge. Understand that. Doesn't matter what the broker says the rates are. If there are more trucks than loads, they're going to be able to move it a little cheaper. If there are more loads than trucks, obviously they're going to have to come up. They have to come up on the rates to get the loads moved. Otherwise, as trucks are calling every load, if there's, let's just say that there are literally 100 loads available and only 10 trucks in the area, and every broker call up to that 233, 240, 250, and the average is at 233 right now with the van, because that's what it takes. Now, the first carrier might say, all right, it's $1.50, it's 7 in the morning, I just want to get my wheels turning, because if they ain't turning, I ain't earning, right? There's that attitude out there. Some might take that. But eventually, there will get down to where there are still 91 loads left and only one truck left total. Now that truck can name his price, right? Doesn't matter what the gauge says, it's what the actual market looks like. So very, very important to understand that you're just looking at a gauge when you look at all these tools. But they are very, very useful. So DAT trend lines is a very useful gauge to understand the market. Again, it'll look at the different regions as well. I've had drivers over the years tell me, oh, brokers never pay that, and I've had brokers say that that's incorrect data. The other thing to understand is this data is pulled from a big sample. It's carriers and brokers actually contribute actual invoice numbers. These are not compiled off of what the posted rates are. These are not compiled off of what, they make up numbers and send them in, random numbers of what they think the rates will be. The way that DAT in particular harvests this data is they actually tap into the TMS systems, TMS, Transportation Management Systems, that carriers use. And they typically like to work only with carriers that have 10 or more trucks, because it's more bang for their buck. They have to get this information. They have to tap into the system, harvest the information, and make sense of it. So it only makes sense if they can harvest enough information from one pull. So they like to get 10 or more trucks. We have been asked to be a contributor, and I know others that have been asked to be a contributor. There are thousands of contributors, and they actually use the actual invoiced rates. So what the brokers actually invoice the shippers and what the carrier actually invoices to the broker, because there's really no way to fudge these systems unless a carrier would really have to go out of their way if they're moving, if they got 10 trucks and they're using a TMS system, they'd pretty much have to duplicate all